Even though God is almighty, yet God is not responsible for everything that happens to people. Even though God is the almighty one, yet he is not responsible for everything that happens to people. Then somebody says, is God not sovereign? God is sovereign, but the sovereignty of God is restricted within the framework of salvation. God's sovereignty is seen in salvation. It is not his will that anyone should perish. This is God's will, the sovereignty of God, that everybody will come to the knowledge of the truth. So the sovereignty of God can only be seen within the framework of salvation. Let us examine a character in the Old Testament by the name of King Saul. After he was denied being a king, Saul died. But look at this. 1 Chronicles chapter 10 verse 13. So Saul died for his transgression which he committed against the Lord. Pay attention. Even against the word of the Lord, which he kept not, and also for asking counsel of one that had a familiar spirit to inquire of it. Next verse. And inquired not of the Lord. Therefore he slew him and turned the kingdom unto David, the son of Jesse. The impression you have in that scripture is that because Saul ignored God and went to inquire from a necromancer or a native doctor, so God killed him. That's the impression you will have in that 1 Chronicles chapter 10 verse 13. But look at the pretext. Look at the pretext in 1 Chronicles chapter 10 verse 4. Then said Saul to his armor bearer, draw thy sword and thrust me through therewith, lest this uncircumcised come and abuse me. But his armor bearer will not, for he was so afraid. So Saul took a sword and fell upon it. Saul took a sword and fell upon it. Give me the amplified of that verse 4. Then Saul said to his armor bearer, draw your sword and thrust me through with it, lest this uncircumcised come and abuse and make sport of me. But his armor bearer will not, for he was terrified. So Saul took his own sword and fell on it. So the question is, who killed Saul? Saul killed himself. So you can see how believing that God is all powerful and that God is behind all things, the writers of the Old Testament attributed Saul's suicide to God. They attributed that it was God that killed Saul. It was an assumption, because from the pretext, Saul said, I don't want the Philistines to kill me. You kill me. And his armor bearer said, no sir. Saul took the knife and killed himself. And the writers of the Old Testament say it was God that killed Saul. So there are a lot of assumptions in the Old Testament that only Jesus clarifies. Only Jesus, only looking at the scriptures in the eyes of Jesus clarifies these assumptions. For example, Job chapter 42. 42 chapters of the book of Job. Job kept saying things he didn't know. In chapter 42 verse 5, give me the Message translation. I admit, I once lived by rumors of you. Now I have it all firsthand from my own eyes and ears. After 42 chapters of Job talking, God taketh, God giveth. God giveth, God taketh, God killeth. After Job has made noise of 42 chapters, in chapter 42, Job now confessed. What I was saying, I didn't know it. I was just assuming. I was speaking based on rumor. I don't have facts. So Job was operating by rumors. And yet many churches have preached series of teachings from Job's message. The Lord has given, the Lord has taken away, and all of that. Churches teach till today. It has become a lot of people's teaching when it is time for burials, because they have not carefully paid attention to study the character of God in the light of Christ. Even in verse 11 of Job 42, his friends came there unto him, all his brethren and all his sisters, and all they that had been of his acquaintance before, and did eat bread with him in his house. And they bemoaned him and comforted him over all the evil that the Lord had brought upon him. Even after Job said, I am only operating by rumor. It is not God that killed my children. It is what I feared that came upon me. It is my fear that opened the door to the devil. His friends were still saying it was evil from God. That is the level to which calamities were attributed to God in the Old Testament. 2 Samuel chapter 24 verse 1. And again the anger of the Lord was kindled against Israel, and he moved David against them to say, go, number Israel and Judah. This story is very instructive because it's a good example of explaining the truth of an incomplete view of God in the Old Testament. Satan was hiding behind the scenes and carrying out havoc, and they were attributing it to God. And of course, the Old Testament is a progressive revelation. So notice that Samuel indicated that God prompted David to count the people. Now, how will God instigate David to count people, and then God will now turn and punish him? Look at 1 Chronicles 21 verse 1. And Satan stood up against Israel and provoked David to number Israel. So it was not God that moved David. It was Satan that moved David. Look at it clearly. Progression of revelation. So notice that even though God is almighty, yet God is not responsible for everything that happens to people.